Well, hello people, and welcome to your 100,000 subscriber special. Hope you're having a wonderful day. You guys asked for another retrospective at this milestone as we celebrate hitting 100,000 subscribers together. Thank you so much for that number. It's truly humbling to be able to see that we have a 6-figure subscriber channel now. Crazy. If you haven't seen the part 1 of our retrospective series at 50,000 subscriber special, please check that out, as this video today features very much as a part 2 from that first sequence. I will leave it linked down below if you haven't seen it for context here. At 50,000 subscribers, we finished that video on a 3/4 of the way done Newb Yoke build, a tutorial city built by accident on the Diamond Coast map from the vanilla base game. And since then we have finished this city entirely, moved on to create Ilos, the Phoenix-inspired massive desert metropolis. Orchid Bay has come and gone as it spread across the Bay of Rivers. And Thessia followed Ilos as we became more familiar with City Skylines mods after our time in the desert. While Edinburgh, Kokai and Rannoch have all been born since, and are currently ongoing as we learned how to play and enjoy cities too, after what was a very rocky period. We'll take a look at that today as well. Thank you so much indeed for allowing me to hit this milestone. As a community, we have grown from a small collection of people enjoying Fremwood and the build guide original Buguzia build, right the way to hitting 100,000 subscribers with Cities 2 finally here. Thank you so much for being a part of that journey if you have been, and if you haven't been, please come and join the wonderful community. So please enjoy this second showcase feature at our favourite cities that we have built together over the last 9 years of playing City Skylines. Welcome to How to Start a City for 2022 in City Skylines. Hope you're having a wonderful day. As always, at the start of each year, we update our How to Start template, incorporating. At 50,000 subscribers, we said goodbye to a mostly finished Newb Yoke build, a vanilla city that lays on the Diamond Coast. A product of a vanilla building skills honed over Fremwood, Buguzia, Palavin and Novaria, the 5th of our vanilla children, if you will. This series was just initially meant to be a small collection of 4 or 5 videos holding your hand through the initial start of the game before I would push you out of the door and say, good luck, you know what you're doing now. But instead, over the course of the year, we constructed one of the finest vanilla cities on the channel. So I don't want to spend too much time looking back over Newb Yoke in this video, as we covered the vast majority of the city during the 50k subscriber special. But Newb Yoke saw some really interesting ideas towards the end of its life, including this elevated public transport system that runs around a suburb, an idea we've recently seen redesigned in Rannoch with an elevated BRT bus system instead of using the trams. But it has to be said, the trams look pretty fantastic like this, don't they? Right toward the end of the series, Newb Yoke also received a secondary downtown, which was used to purpose the new arrivals of Hearts of Korea content creator pack alongside the Skyscrapers one as well. I really wanted to find a way to use these assets in the Noob's Guide series since they were brand new DLCs, but in the grand scheme of things, this part of the map feels quite disconnected. A little bit of the hierarchy collapses around here, and there is only kind of one road heading into what is a very dense metropolitan area. That does feel a little bit out on its own for what it actually is. Newb Yoke Cargo Port is also a fan favourite and considered to be the best of the OE cargo ports by some as well, where it also used a monorail pipeline and some wooden bridges as a tie for some oil barges perhaps, which is a credit to Zukaboa, who I saw this idea from during one of his wonderful port builds. It was also toward the end of Newb Yoke where I found myself becoming significantly more comfortable with interchanges. Famously so for those that follow the channel, they were always my worst aspect of the game. However, now after so long playing, just a general understanding of how important road measurement is, and just giving yourself enough room, infrastructure that requires it, you definitely have the space in City Skylines. 9 tile builds restricted, slightly more so, but with 25 tiles there is plenty of room to fill, and this windmill turbine is one of my absolute favourites from any city. But all in all, despite these somewhat random additions to the later life of Newb Yoke to accommodate some DLCs, didn't fit fully into the final plan. It is always a pleasure to revisit this tropical vanilla city, It was kind of an unplanned child almost, wasn't it? It was a bit of a surprise pregnancy, Newb Yoke. We weren't expecting to take the map as far as we did, but I'm so happy that we did. If you did spend time with us during our time on the Noob's Guide, I know a lot of you came from this series, so thank you so much for following it. And indeed, I would love to know if Newb Yoke is your favourite build. But the flow of the arterial here has become something of a signature to the start of our builds. As we develop those more bespoke custom builds around those major arterial frames, the university on the right here coming into the city is simply just superb. It's a great view, isn't it? Look at that. Very happy with that, with cycling integrated into it as well. But an absolute celebration of Cities Vanilla. I think Newb Yoke on a surprisingly good map. Some of these Cities 1 base game maps are pretty notoriously terrible for the most part. They're pretty just janky. But it's definitely a diamond in the rough, if you will enjoy the pun. Otherwise, Newb Yoke speaks for itself. Please enjoy seeing Newb Yoke again. Now I'll catch you guys in the desert in a moment. The 21st of December 2021 saw us take an unusual turn for the channel. We'd spent the previous years together playing vanilla, and although we did dabble in mods for 5B1C Season 2 when we were invited to collaborate in that series, but besides this I was a mod noob diving headfirst straight into a fully modded, very heavily themed city in the form of Ilos. Inspired by the desert metropolis of Phoenix in Arizona, I had all these tools at my fingertips and absolutely no idea how to utilize them. But over the next 18 months, we'd craft a unique and diverse landscape, which came to be the beloved of many of you on the channel, replacing Palaven in some instances. So let's have a little look over the desert, shall we? See what we did right, and also see what we did wrong during our first time playing City Skylines with mods. So when we very first started Ilos way back in the day, I was super daunted by this blank flat space we had before us. It was very daunting as to how I was going to start it. Super unique biome as well. I'd never built a desert city before. And Ilos represented the first recreation. Obviously this city is super heavily inspired by Phoenix in Arizona. And that was the first time we moved to recreating, wasn't it? Palaven was inspired somewhat by Pittsburgh, at least the downtown, and there was elements of Chicago sprinkled across Bavaria, but they were still kind of my builds. Ilos is really based off of Phoenix, especially the vast Mile grid, which is a concept I would love to re-explore, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Mile grid today as well, as to how that really helped shape and format the builds in the episodes from a recording point of view, very different to any other city build, and something that I would recommend. I know the grid can often be frowned upon in City Skylines building, but when it's to this extreme degree, it really changes up how you approach city building almost. In hindsight, the start of Ilos felt super frantic. I wasn't really sure exactly where I was beginning the recreation of Phoenix from, and if anything, this part of the city really kind of falls away from the traditional Phoenix build. We're very much away from the Mile grid here. The arterials are more curved. There's junctions that you don't usually see in and around Phoenix. A lot of the early intersection marking tool work is a little bit janky and probably nonsensical, and you can definitely tell we were getting to grips with the new parking lot mechanics of modded CS. We initially really obsessed over these bigger parking lot mod packs, which are very cool but super node intensive, and eventually towards the end of the series we decided to move more toward the big parking lot roads packs, which are much less node intensive than these other ones are. But I think compared to later Ilos against earlier Ilos, you can certainly tell that we were not familiar with the mods or the exact format and presentation we were trying to go for here. It was still a little bit janky and not quite exactly how I envisioned it. And indeed, some of ILOS's early residential work is a far cry from everything else around the city, essentially. This is really a practice of not really knowing whether or not we were going to zone or plop yet, and kind of being indecisive between the two. However, early ILOS wasn't all terrible. Our understanding of the intersection marking tool and traffic manager mod allowed us to create this bow tie intersection, and a big shout out to 2C for helping me configure this, essentially removing the left-hand turn from the junction to take it on a roundabout to come back across that crossroads. A super cool little traffic concept that works even up to 133,000 population. And something I'd actually quite like to translate into CS2 now. It's probably something that's quite possible with the built-in road tools in the game, against some classic American big box commercial, which was a brand new concept available to me playing mods for the first time, to actually have this realistically scaled Costco and Walmart stores, something that isn't possible in vanilla. Now, I mentioned one of the main features of ILOS was its mile grid, which is incredibly inspired from Phoenix. All of these roads are 100 units by 100 units using arterial systems, and then each block is filled with a real-life inspiration taken from Arizona, including these water district suburbs. We took huge inspiration from Tucson University, of course. Golf courses, huge medical complexes, farms and fields in some cases, and it was a lot of fun exploring Phoenix to find what quirky and next build we could squeeze into one of these mile grid frames. Mods also allowed us to be much more creative in the way we use the base game assets. For example, the Varilad Medical Center here, which is named after our fellow content creator, Varilad. Thank you for your support, mate. The mods allowed us to use the campus DLC unique buildings to create an authentic, fused together medical center that you would find in a city like this, really opening my eyes to the possibility of just how we could repurpose many different assets to suit our needs. Even though this is satisfying education from a city perspective, for us, it's a medical center. Phoenix's extremely unique water suburbs also made an appearance across various different points of the city, including Few Candy Lakes. And speaking of Few Candy, it was also a pleasure to have her build in ILOS twice, both with this amazing medical center complex with a kind of apartment condo district and then a dirt racetrack, which is functional as well, by the way. You can see the cars driving around it. It's great to have Few Candy build in this city. She also built us a building site as well, but out of some incredible props. If you haven't checked out Few Candy, do go check her out. She's one of the best detailers in the CS community. And we also had Imperator build in the city as well, where he built this big box combo with farm and condo complexes. Super unique American build, and he absolutely nailed the vibe here. Also, can we just reference how much I actually miss ILOS's road networks? These American roads are just absolutely brilliant, aren't they? One of ILOS's and the mile grid's biggest features was this big diagonal arterial road elevated above the rest of the network that allowed people to move quickly across the grid without having to use the 90-degree arterial roads to get across to one side of it. It's a concept we see in real-life Phoenix. This is where we actually got this idea from. And looking back on it now, it does seem a little messy. I thought at the time when I built this that it was super well planned and organized, but in hindsight now, looking back over this, it feels like it could have done with quite a bit more work, couldn't it? But it was a proof of the concept of our planning improving, the fact that we could look at a real life network plan like we saw in Phoenix and translate it to the game. At least most of the time it's pretty well translated, but setting up really nice against universities, against rail yards, against low density, endless suburbia like you do find in Phoenix. It was a real kind of testament to see my gameplay skills improve when I compare it to something like Fremwood, for example. Realistic industrial builds also became much more within our reach with the addition of train yards, and again with Phoenix providing so much inspiration for the configuration and the layout of this. The Brassac train yard here, which again is named after our wonderful moderator in the Discord. Brassac, thank you for all your support, mate. Really shown the possibilities of modded industry, which was a massive eye-opener compared to going from zoning simple 4x4 lots here to being able to place and combine different assets with custom train cars and custom rails. Really opened up my eyes as to what modded industry could be in City Skylines. ILOS is also home to the absolute gargantuan ILOS Sky Harbour Airport, which is a fan favourite on the channel, some of the best airport work I think we've ever done. And from this perspective you can see it's almost as wide as the entire Mar grid configuration itself. Of course, based off of the Phoenix Sky Harbor, an absolutely huge airport in real life as well. This sits just to the south of the downtown and really kind of shows just how much space you can fill with proper infrastructure when playing modded CS. An airport this size on 9 tiles would essentially fill most of your map, but on 81 tiles it was really refreshing to start playing with this kind of scale in CS. However, Ilos wasn't just the enormous Mar grid and the huge Ilos Sky Harbor. Outside of the main metropolitan area we had the Flying Duck Boneyard, which was easily one of my favourite and most unique builds in the city as a whole, including several really unique little rural towns that were all stolen from out in the real life Arizona desert, including this one right here, which was known as Bad Giza. And who can forget the forestry mountain town of Williams, which is based off of the real life Williams in northern Arizona. It was at this point in the map we decided to play with a different desert biome rather than going for the flat Arizona desert in the Phoenix Valley. Here we introduce a little bit of grass with some of that kind of spruce mountain pine to bring in a slightly different, more mountainous vibe that you tend to find in northern Arizona. One of my favourite towns, this one's. I absolutely love looking around Williams. And of course it wouldn't be a OE city without the quintessential weird build, if you like. In Palaven, of course, we had the castle, Novaria had Peak 15, and Ilos is home to the Conduit, a Area 51 inspired Air Force base using the satellite radars with a cargo airport to create a pretty believable and a secret Air Force base here. I really enjoyed the Conduit. Definitely one of the most unique builds we've ever put together on the channel. And as we mentioned in Newb Yoke, our ability to translate real-life infrastructure such as interchanges, proper lanes and lane markings started to really flourish in Ilos as we were just becoming much more familiar with the game. A simple diamond interchange here with the correct intersection markings was something I was super proud of at the time, and really kind of sparked my love affair with the intersection marking tool. Probably my favourite mod of CS, up there with Node Controller I think. With some classic highway art, who can forget a highway turtle, ant and sun as well of course. Ilos' skyline is one of my favourites and probably definitely one of the more realistic ones. I remember building this episode up and having the picture of the Phoenix Skylines on my left hand side and really chiselling out each little nuance in depth and height as the skyline dips and falls as it sits bang in the centre of the Mar grid. And when we were building this, one of the key views was this one right here. The diagonal approach on the arterial that runs through the Mar grid with the metro passing alongside it with multiple levels beneath it. An extremely satisfying viewpoint to watch. It's within downtown Ilos you'll certainly find some of the more unique builds, including the repurposing of the Financial Districts DLC to actually make that pack somewhat enjoyable, since it's probably one of the worst DLCs the game received over the years. Repurposing it here next to university assets and general financial and Wall Street kind of vibes to create a proper financial district for the city on the east side. And it's also where you will find one of my favourite ever builds, the Ilos State Governor's Office on the west side of the downtown, named after the Ilos Governor Karina, of course, one of the map makers, and also as a reference to the literal Arizona Governor in Phoenix. Repurposing the university campus assets into a government municipal building is easily one of my favourite things we've ever done. And in the south of the downtown is really where we diverted away from real-life Phoenix. In the real version of Phoenix, this area of the city to the south of the main central business district is essentially just industry and rail yards for miles and miles and miles. But because we'd already done so much of that across the city, we decided to take it the total opposite way, essentially an enormous pedestrianised commercial district made up of hotels, casinos, bars, clubs and shops, alongside some apartments in very unique configurations. This is definitely one of the most unique districts of the city, considering it isn't really inspired by Phoenix at all, but it does blend in quite well with the existing infrastructure, if I do say so myself. of course, Mount Margaret. This mountain was not here when the map first starts, it was just pure empty flat space. But just to help break it up and also to reference, I think if I can remember correctly, what was Camelback Mountain in Arizona. Just to give a little bit of a viewpoint here, of course, where we had the Ilos viewpoint overlooking the huge Mar grid, but also some really nice mountain road vibes that really helped break up the relentless flatness of the desert. And it was really our kind of first major terraforming project using the extra landscaping tools, and my first attempt at essentially map making, which I know some people weren't super happy with this mountain, but I really liked how it came out, and it really helps dominate the Mar grid as well. You get some great viewpoints from up on Mount Margaret. It was also really interesting just from browsing Google Earth to come across some of the more quirky designs across Phoenix, including some of the many golf course residential suburbs which we replicated here with Richard's Golf and Rec, named after one of our beautiful Patreon subscribers. Every time I see one of these things, it always makes me think how many smashed windows are actually reported in Phoenix from these golf courses. And whilst we are back here, the view down Main Street Ilos remains one of my absolute favourite arterial frames across any city that we've ever made together. And of course, the trip to Ilos would not be complete without referencing one of the many Jerry and alien covens across the city. There is a full video depicting all of them if you'd like to check them out. But this was definitely a silver lining to Ilos that I did not expect, and something that still makes a lot of us laugh, even to this day. God rest Jerry Sr., his son did an awful job of carrying on his legacy. I do in fact love Ilos so much that as of the making of this video I can turn to my right and see an enormous canvas of the endless low density residential skyline of Phoenix. But today honestly it feels a little weird seeing Ilos again. This city is my first ever attempt at making a modded build, and it definitely shows the later parts of the city are significantly more advanced and detailed as our knowledge of the mods grew, whereas the earlier stages of Ilos are really possibly some of the worst building we ever did. There's a lot of jank around there. You could clearly see we were split between are we going to zone everything or are we going to plop everything. And it wasn't quite there yet, I think, when just planning the general early starts of the city. But this place will always hold a special place in my heart. And really, it was the city that allowed us to really take Google Earth as a city building tool and learn how to translate the infrastructure and the designs we find in the real world into city skylines. And I think that if it wasn't for Ilos, we wouldn't be as good as doing that, especially with the Mar grid frames. Picking out individual universities, hospitals, residential districts, whatever it was we wanted to fill the Mar grid with. That whole process of referencing Google Earth and bringing it into city skylines, I think made Ilos feel a little bit more alive than any of the other cities we'd done. Whereas maybe not emotionally as connected as something like Palaven, for example, for obvious COVID lockdown reasons. Ilos for me is still one of my favourite ever cities, and I would love to revisit the Mar grid project at some point in a future build. I would definitely revisit the southwest of America for more inspiration at some point. Probably not Arizona, as we've already done kind of the deepest, hottest, darkest desert. Maybe we can head over to Salt Lake City or something over in Colorado. But I would love to just play with that huge grid sprawl again. If you haven't tried it, I would absolutely recommend taking on a build in this theme. It really just kind of changes your whole city building perspective. But it is an absolute pleasure to see Ilos again. I hope you have all enjoyed it. I know this city means a lot to a lot of you. So if you were one of the ones that watched it live, thank you so much indeed for supporting it. And big shout outs again to all the people involved in this series, from Turtle the Builder, developing custom billboards, Few Candy and Imperator for doing collab builds here. If you were at all involved in Ilos at any stage of its life, thank you for bearing with some very janky mod building before the city really found its feet a little later on in its life. If you've yet to see Ilos, there are a lot of people that have joined the channel since this city was built. I would definitely recommend you check out the playlist. There's a lot of fun ideas here, and Ilos is a big long playlist as well, so you'll have plenty to binge. Otherwise, please do enjoy some cinematics of Ilos whilst we are back in the desert for one final time, and then I'll catch you guys in Orchid Bay in a moment. At the turn of 2023, with Newb Yoke having come to a close and Ilos in the later stages of its life, we were left with very large holes to fill. Two of the favourite builds on the channel were both ending within a few months of one another, leaving me feeling a little anxious, as I always do when it comes to a city close. I asked myself, how will I better this? How will I make the people care about this city the way they cared about the previous one and the ones before that? The questions are relentless when it comes to this time in a build, and while Thessia would eventually come in as a sequel to Ilos, it would be Orchid Bay that arose to fill the vanilla-shaped hole in our lives. Orchid Bay has in some sense become the city on the channel now. A crown once held by a Palaven, and a crown we all thought would never be removed from the city lying on the murky coast. But Orchid Bay managed to wrestle that title from Palaven to become the favourite vanilla city on the channel, by a good margin too. A recent vote on the community tab shows Orchid Bay as the clear favourite by a large margin now. Many of you now consider Orchid Bay to be your home. Orchid Bay is the culmination of years of practice, failure, testing and succeeding to create what I consider to be my best work, my magnum opus, if you will. I also developed an enormous love for the map that Orchid Bay was built on, the Bay of Rivers, with a shout out to Sidai, the map maker behind the best official map in my opinion. Everything I had learned and everything you guys had taught me over our years together culminated in this showcase of what unmodded City Skylines can be, with all of its DLC and content creator packs available. A true, and in my opinion, the best city building experience available in video gaming today, at least at the writing of this script. So let's take a look at what made this city so incredible and so well loved as the 6th vanilla city that we built together. So as we begin to discuss the fan favourite that is Orchid Bay, there's one thing that I would like to, thank for how the city developed. When we first started this build from this roundabout in the opening sequence here, I kind of knew exactly how I wanted the city to float up towards the coastline, and that was really down to the map. But Sidai took a real life height map from China, and having all this topography in the terrain really shaped the builds and how they flow. The rivers gave me kind of a natural geographical boundary as to when to stop, and I feel like that shaped this part of the city almost to perfection. I think this is really one of the best bits of Orchid Bay outside of the downtown, is this initial starting suburb with all the details we've got into it we'll take a look at as well. But the topography across Bay of Rivers, I think, really made this city. I don't think maybe I would be as fond of, and maybe you guys wouldn't be as fond of Orchid Bay if it wasn't for the Bay of Rivers map. It really helped shape what we did here. But there are many unique builds and combo builds across Orchid Bay as well, including a campus combined with a farmland to create something of a agricultural research and development college, which was probably my favourite campus we did in Orchid Bay as a whole. And who can possibly forget the starting couplet? The couplet system has become something of a design of my cities now, a little bit of a signature. It's how I always prefer to start, either with highway or regular roads. In this case, we did a big cycling couplet that goes off into the high density areas, interwove public transport through it with cycling, of course. There's trams through the middle that interlink with metro and trains further down the road. And then also layering this network with ones passing over it, land masses up against the side of it. Of all the couplets we've built across all of the cities, the start of Orchid Bays could possibly be my favourite one we ever did. Now, I am always a huge fan of a town centre build. There's many across all the different cities we built together. But Two Church Town Centre, again, it's almost shaped by the landmass. You can see the bulge in the riverbank, kind of just dictating the way the roads curve around to respect that flow of the topography as well. Really cool, and some great detailing in here with multiple tram lines converging. And there's probably about 7 or 8 bus lines here as well. It's super busy, super highly detailed as well. And the introduction of pedestrian roads into CS really allowed us to change up these town centres. Of course, we're doing many more different and new and exciting things in Rannoch these days with all the DLCs available. But at this point, Plazas and Promenades was fairly new, and definitely the first opportunity we had to integrate it into a town centre, and turned out wonderfully, didn't it? One of my favourite areas of the city, this. One of the best things about Orchid Bay is its public transport. There's many different methods interwoven with one another, For example, both intercity and internal trains meet here, with trams and underground metro, and there's a bus line just around the corner as well. And this is really kind of a summary of my playstyle. It's something I've always gravitated towards playing CS. I think for this reason alone, I would really enjoy Transport Fever, because I just love forming the city and the infrastructure around these main transit lines, and Orchid Bay is a homage to that theory. Orchid Bay really comes into its own as it transitions into its medium density districts, verging on high density. But this whole gig, concert, public event plaza square across the river with the bus system that runs as an express around the entire edge of what is essentially Orchid Bay's Manhattan Island, with lots more infrastructure around that, elevated cycleways hooked into the quays that also hook into ferries. There's cycling on the roads, really tightly compact interchanges on multiple levels. An absolute joy. I am incredibly proud of Orchid Bay as a whole. It's so satisfying to see everyone move around it. I think possibly the most satisfying city to watch, but just the scurry of the ants and the interlinking of the public transport, it's pretty special. I also felt that the flow of Orchid Bay was significantly better than any other city we'd built so far. Not only were the builds themselves just more detailed as we had more packs and experience available to us, but how they all connect with one another. For example, we have a large arterial road here, surrounded by residential, office parks, waterfronts, actual parks, and just look how it blends around it. It's all pretty seamless. The back of the metro has paths out of it back into more public transport where there's buses and jobs and shops available, but we have this larger square in the middle that really functions as kind of a big public inner city plaza with public transport all around it. This public transport hub on the approach to the downtown is one of my favourites we've ever done. I think that planning point runs true for the whole city. There's something about Orchid Bay's networks, especially from this bird's eye perspective, that really just gives you a sense of how everything flows and interlinks together. Again, which is part of my own design, but of course also down to the map as well. Those natural geographical boundaries really dictate how something should stop or start. And I think this picture here is a testament to that theory. Orchid Bay is also home to a number of airports, possibly a record amount, including the LAX International Airport on an island, which is easily, I think, my best ever vanilla airport. Whilst we also constructed a dedicated cargo airport for the first time over in the bay. And of course, Imperator's beautiful mountain-set Air Force base, repurposing the airport's DLC, and some very clever use of pedestrian roads to create an authentic vanilla Air Force base. The genius of Imperator never fails to impress, does it? And we also did yet another collaboration with Candy. She gave us one of the more innovative part builds we've ever seen, using a ton of different props and a combination of a wide variety of park assets to create a real kind of family fun park experience, complete with lakes, canoes, log flumes, parks, giant cakes, horse stables, and just generally a very good time. Really cute build from QC and an excellent execution of vanilla prop detailing. And then of course there is Orchid Bay Regional Airport, which in hindsight reflection now is a little larger than a regional airport probably should be, but I just got carried away with the build. I was really enjoying the shape of the terminal. And again, notice how the airport is sat slightly elevated above everything around it here. Another testament to how the topography really shaped the design and the build of Orchid Bay as it grew. The repurposing of airport assets alongside the train station and the airport refueling depots allowed us to repurpose a monorail line into a pipeline to create one of the more authentic vanilla industries we've ever done, in the form of Orchid Bay's oil refinery. However, it wasn't just the 4 regular industries that we built. We repurposed factories, ore mining, fishing, abandoned buildings and detailing to create an authentic, in my opinion at least, naval base in vanilla, which was definitely one of the more challenging builds. But again, a testament to how our familiarity with all of the different assets could actually come to something like this. This is easily one of the more unique builds across all the maps we've ever done. A far cry from Thessia's modded naval base, isn't it? Orchid Bay isn't just skyscrapers and airports though, it's also home to one of my favourite uses of the European theme that we've ever done. Whilst we did initially test the Barcelona superblock idea out in the very late stages of Palaven, Old Haven, this older style downtown, is a really cute blend of that, again using those blocks combined with plazas and the European themed unique buildings such as the cathedral and the larger Market Street asset to create what is, in my opinion, a really authentic, cute European district using some of the more awkward assets that are in the game. Bearing in mind there's no plot the growables or move it here, all of this is zoned, and in my opinion it looks pretty fantastic, combined with some wonderful detailing on the outskirts near the old city wall. One of the most underrated areas of the city, I think, is Old Haven. I really like this bit of the town. Now, Orchid Bay's CBD is definitely one of the largest in terms of height and both the footprint that this area takes up. Immediately as I loaded up this map, I knew these kind of Manhattan-style finger islands that were near the coast were perfect for a CBD development, and boy did this thing change over time. And the addition of the Skyscrapers content creator pack made an enormous difference to Cities Skylines, I think, didn't it? And Orchid Bay's CBD is a testament to that. Again, combined with more couplet systems, public transport hubs, beautiful waterfront parks and massive stadiums, and some possible dodgy flight paths as well. Orchid Bay's skyline, I think, possibly could be one of the most iconic. I think maybe if you put up a silhouette and ask someone to identify this, I think most people would probably recognise Orchid Bay's skyline over any of the others. This city is also home to the busiest transit hub we've ever built, and in my opinion, the best transit hub we've ever built. Having seen this city again today, maybe we could have even doubled up this building to really hammer home just how much people we can cram on one public transport line at a time. But either way, nothing beats the walk-in porn of this public transport hub. Another thing I love about Orchid Bay, which perhaps wasn't as present in the other vanilla builds, was that as you head away from the main central business district areas, which are always my primary focus, the flow and the planning doesn't really deteriorate or kind of collapse away from that. For those that watch the series, you will be able to individually identify the towns of Karen, Sharon, Lotus and Denise from here. And that's something that I love about this map. We really filled quite a lot of it, and that kind of process of not just building a singular city, more of a county or a state, is something that I carry across into all of my builds now. And honestly, it's the way I prefer building rather than just one city. I'd much rather have personalized little towns on the outskirts of that main metropolitan area. Orchid Bay's coastline is also one of my favourites we've ever done, and probably the most developed. It flows from the central business district through 3 separate towns with multiple parks, public transport systems interweaved along it, and also multiple interchanges as well. Really a testament to how our planning designs had really progressed over the years. Something like this in Friendwood or even Bergusia would have been impossible back in the day. But now, thank you to all the things we learned together from the Cities Skylines community, it's all possible, and it's all doable. And I'm incredibly proud of this waterfront. I really like this area of the city. Orchid Bay is also home to some of the more unique builds in the city, including a dedicated car factory called the Yoke's Wagon Automobile Plant, using the car factory and a mock racetrack to help give purpose to the building. Whilst the same also rings true for the Institute of Technology, combined with 2 factories to create an authentic sports headquarters complex, which was inspired by the Nike headquarters in the United States, repurposing some of the sports fields, campus assets and factories to create an actual brand headquarters. Super pleased with this build, did not expect it to come out as well as it did, and shout out to that Cougar logo as well. Although the unique builds were not at all limited to just the industry, in this example right here, the Augusta National Golf Club We used an absolute ton of nodes to create an authentic golf course using decals and flags from the content creator packs, alongside part life assets and a couple of unique buildings to create a pretty convincing and authentic golfing club in Cities Vanilla. A further testimony as to how we celebrated and respected Orchid Bay's topography is a pass by here as we come past the Eggs and Legs Wildlife Sanctuary and Winged Four Hills, both at builds elevated either side of two different elevated highway networks that approach an interchange that flow all in and around this mountainous landscape. If Orchid Bay taught me anything, it was that you do not need to terraform all of the time, although sometimes it is needed for certain builds. Allowing your networks and hills and roads to flow like this really adds so much more personality into the build, something I would definitely respect going forward in future vanilla projects. And in a further testament to Egg's ever-improving interchange work, how about this dumbbell interchange that was repurposed with multiple elevated slip lanes? A very far cry from the interchanges of Fremwood, isn't it? Particularly proud of this one. Learning how to layer and add different slip lanes where the pressure was needed to be alleviated was easily one of my proudest moments in Cities Vanilla. And it still holds up perfectly to this day at 115,000 population. But Orchid Bay is more than just the random quirky builds or the massive expansive CBDs. It's the scope and the scale of the build that really puts it head and shoulders above any of the others, in my opinion, at least the vanilla ones for that fact. Given the fact it is an 81 tile build compared to something smaller like Palaven's 25 probably does help with that scope and scale aspect of things. But this city is 6 years of playing Cities Vanilla. All the tips and tricks that we learned from each other, from other content creators in the space, had all come to fruition in this one city. There are so many memories wrapped up in all the little ravines and valleys of this map, and a wonderful shout out to Sidai again. He had built the perfect map for me without me even knowing that I needed it. I really do think we owe so much to the Bay of Rivers map for the way that Orchid Bay looks, feels, and how it developed. It really did help shape my ideas. And this city isn't just a let's play, is it? It has displaced Palaven, the city that really encompassed hello people, and yes please. For this city to display something as fondly thought of as Palaven is, really makes it more special for me as a content creator creating these virtual, fictional worlds for us to explore. To see you guys get so much out of them really encourages me to make more of them. And that has never stood truer than with Orchid Bay. To read all of your wonderful comments and ideas and suggestions on this series over the 18 months that we spent building it, it humbles me greatly, and even to this day, I am still sad that Orchid Bay was finished off by the node count. And isn't it funny that the two most fondly thought of cities in Palaven and Orchid Bay both died because of the node count? There's probably something to look into there, isn't there? But I do consider this my finest work, my magnum opus. No city has beaten this, and I think it'll be a very long time before another vanilla city even begins to try and threaten this map. Everything from the topography and the community watching it for me was absolutely perfect, and although some of the builds in hindsight may be a little bit flawed now, looking back through not so rose tinted glasses, I still absolutely love Orchid Bay, and I thank you for all the support you dropped on it. Please do enjoy some refreshing cinematics of Orchid Bay while we're back here, and I'll catch you guys in the Isles of Thessia in a moment. As Orchid Bay flourished into its adolescent stages, Thessia, the second of our modded city builds, started up. An Australian-inspired chain of tropical islands, a far cry from the landlocked desolation of the Isles Desert, which was our first time playing with Cities mods, which also kind of had a bit of a weird effect in the fact it made me lose familiarity with some of the mods we'd built up in Isles because the setting was so different from the desert in Thessia. At the writing of this script, Thessia is still not complete. Although almost there, Thessia still has a little bit of life left in it yet. Built on its namesake map, which was created yet again by Eggsy and Karina Bespoke for us. Shout out to those beautiful human beings with fantastic character as well, by the way. Thessia is a unique city build because it was our first attempt at creating more of a city-state rather than a singular city metropolis like Ilos or any of the other vanilla cities before it. Very individual separate towns, all isolated from one another, connected by long distance train lines with rural builds sprinkled in between. The start of Thessia felt much calmer, more composed than that of Ilos at least. I myself was more familiar with the mods and what they did and what they could do. For example, the concept of fusing assets together to create more believable city spaces was second nature at this point, and our general city building skills were just better after 8 years of playing and learning together. Whilst as fondly as Thessia is thought of, it also comes with a little bit of a darker lining to it as well. As I mentioned earlier, this city build is not finished and it has stuttered in the later stages of its life. The rocky and bumpy road that was the launch of Cities Skylines 2 caused a lot of people to not only stop playing Cities as a franchise, but also to stop watching it as well. This, combined with the fact Thessia was already a more niche style build with the fact it was a city-state as opposed to a normal build, if you like, caused views and interest to generally plummet, which as a full-time YouTuber is not really good for business, as you can probably imagine. This doesn't mean Thessia is gone forever though, however, we will live stream the city and finish it. It would be a shame to have one unfinished project while every single one before it was always seen through to completion. So let's take a minute to sit back and recap and take a moment to explore the Thessian Isles and remind ourselves of just exactly how much is in this city. So I mentioned the start of Thessia felt much more composed, and that was because this city was really unique. It was a train station only start, and this right here is the start of the city. There was no massive 3-lane highway interchange to work with. And honestly, this is my preferred way of starting a city. Just being able to work with a smaller town and a train station rather than massive highway networks really changes up how you build. Now obviously Thessia is kind of supposed to be in this vibe, smaller towns all connected by train, but I really wish this was an option for, well, obviously base game CS2 now, but also back into the days of CS1 as well. I think having the option to choose between major sort of highway networks or train station start would be a wonderful addition to the game, and Valkyrie Town Centre here is one of my favourite areas of Thessia. Lots of greenbelt and lots of public transport. Big thumbs up from Egg. And we also made our own bleachers out of tram poles and campus benches. A very cool little creation. Comparing the starts of Ilos and Thessia is almost like comparing chalk and cheese. The start of Thessia is significantly slower, much more detail is given to each area, and even the kind of formulation of back alleys behind commercial to allow an organic, natural, walkable space where you would expect citizens to bypass and turn left and cut behind a building. These are all things we started to factor into the construction of the initial start of Thessia, at least anyway, and themes that have carried on later into the build as well. Thessia's generic industry also significantly evolved from the days of Ilos as we began to construct more modular sections to create an authentic brewery yard, which of course was named after Valkyrie Town, the Valkyrie Bitter, or VB if you will. Easily one of my favourite industrial builds who've ever done this little mock brewery using generic industry. Incredibly creative and extremely cool. Looking around Valkyrie from kind of the bird's eye perspective really helps give you a sense of the scale in Thessia, how everything is positioned and how everything is connected either via very long distance train lines or indeed via these kind of smaller 2 to 3 lane national roads. Definitely my favourite thing about this city is just how realistically scaled and how realistically distanced everything is from one another. Obviously, it's kind of a big play with our Australian theme to replicate the size and scope of Australia, but it translates really well into Cities Skylines, I think. Some of the more rural towns in Thessia again are such a far cry from the rural towns of Ilos. The town here of Ardakyashi, set right out in the distant Isles of Thessia, maintains just about a view to the CBD way off in the distant skyline, whilst also being packed with details, back alleys, trash containers and props all behind the commercial. And of course a Coco's Outback as well, maintained and owned by the lovely Scope, of course. But there's just something about Thessia's detailing and theme that just make it so detailable. It's kind of hard to describe, but looking back now upon everything we did in Thessia, I really love this city. It was also in Thessia I felt that my prop work significantly improved. There's multiple instances across the entire city of more intricate prop detailing, which was something we attempted in Ilos, but definitely not across the entire city, and certainly not as consistently as we have done in Thessia. And the smaller regional cargo port of Sentinel, also one of my favourite builds, where you can see that prop work translating again. It was at this point in my Cities Skylines journey I found myself much more inspired by creators like Fucandi, $2.20 and Sully, the real kind of prop heavy people who really use these little details to bring areas to life, influencing my own work so much more. Definitely a far cry from the cargo port of Fremwood, isn't it? One of my favourite ports, this little one in Sentinel. Really compact and some great detailing around here. And I think Sentinel Waterfront is a real testament to how our knowledge and ability with the mods have grown. Combinations of Move It, Node Controller and In-Section Marking Tool really allow us to create a dynamic waterfront here with pullover stops for the buses to be used, fused commercials with organic delivery areas behind them, big huge stretch nodes that have been in-section marked up to create authentic kind of bollards and stops and kind of indicating public transport lines. Incredibly proud of Sentinel Waterfront. It's really kind of a one-of-a-kind. Really love this area of the city, which I feel like I'm going to say a lot about Thessia today. However, it wasn't just our commercial that received the benefit of the mods. Sentinel's campus is one of my favourites, and where we also came up with the concept of using some props alongside the In-Section Marking Tool to create authentic staircases, which is a massive game changer for detailing. Any kind of public space, when you want to transition up to a different layer, having the ability to have just even a visual staircase is super important. And with the little water feature at the front here and all the detailing we did around it, I absolutely love Sentinel's University, one of my favourite builds we've ever done on the channel. Our generic industries also saw some significant improvements with the additions of the mods. This here is a farm from the Industries DLC, but with some clever use of Bob and repurposing of different commercial assets, we managed to create an authentic vineyard based on an actual vineyard from the Blue Mountains in Sydney. Shout out to Rach for the inspiration for that one. But super cool repurposing of assets here, just to do something a bit different with your generic industry, and I absolutely love Tassoni Vineyards. Incredible build, sat right on the mountaintop, one of the best areas of the city, this one. I'm also particularly proud of all the networking here. I think it's a significant improvement of how far we've come together in CS. I really love how all the trains and the road lines interconnect and kind of stop off at rain yards and split off to rejoin the main lines as the roads split off from their couplets as well to create bypasses around different towns. A real kind of practice in network planning here across multiple different layers of height. And again, the bird's eye perspective gives a real sense of how everything interweaves and links together. Very proud of this. Our generic industry also evolved into a modded naval base thanks to some wonderful inspiration from Fremantle in Australia, which is a real life naval facility, where we're able to use some wonderful props here to indicate an actual navy presence. And you can also notice some ships across the water actually functioning as naval vessels. This was the ability to change out the cargo ship model for a navy ship, giving the impression that the Thessian navy is actually working and moving around the harbour. A very cool aesthetic to a pretty unique build. Now, of course, this would not be a Thessia recap without talking about hot bridges in your area. The wonderful network genius that is Teddy Radko collaborated in the series to build us a authentic recreation of the Sydney Harbour Bridge that has 2 trains and 2 metro lines running directly underneath it, with trams down the middle, cycling in the middle, and then cars on the side, using the monorail lines to construct the suspension arches. Easily one of the coolest infrastructure projects, if not the coolest infrastructure projects I've ever seen in CS. Teddy Radko deserves all the love and praise for this build. It was absolutely incredible, and every time I load into this map I pretty much come straight back to this bridge just to watch it flow. It's pretty spectacular and is the perfect addition to the downtown Thessia area. Our ability to merge and connect public transport lines only grew with experience as well. The central Thessian transit hub is one of the busiest, if not the busiest, we've ever built. It certainly rivals Orchid Bay's central business district hub, as intercity trains, metro, trams and buses all converge in the heart of the city to create some truly enjoyable walking porn. It's really interesting here to see a public transport system that's so heavily based upon trains and how busy they can actually become. Now, whilst I mentioned during the ILUS sequence that skyline is my favourite, the inner city of Thessia is certainly head and shoulders above ILUS by a large margin. Evidence of our detailing and prop skills coming leaps and bounds on from our efforts in the desert. The central Morinth Square in downtown Thessia is some of my favourite and best ever intersection marking tour work, combined with some wonderful prop plazas, and of course some beautiful custom flags from Terry, our resident flag maker. Downtown Stadium District is also another fine example of how our understanding of Move It and Node Controller could work in combination to create some really cool layers with pedestrian roads crossing over each other, interlinking with multiple forms of public transport, while still respecting the flow and the topography of the map that we had to work with. And I think of all the stadiums we've ever built together, this one is the one with the least amount of car parking, and it is definitely the one I enjoy the most. Evolving on from the ILUS Governor's Office repurposing campus assets into a government building of some sorts evolved further, with the idea of Thessia creating a seat of power based off of Australia's Canberra Government District, which has super cool geometric road networks flowing around it. If you've never checked out Canberra's roads on Google Earth, I would implore you to do so. It's extremely interesting. But this whole idea translated super well into City Skylines, with possibly my best ever government build. I think we'll struggle to beat this one just due to the nature of Canberra's road networks. Our park details also really flourished as our ability to translate real-life infrastructure from Google Earth continued to improve. This park right here, for example, is taken directly from the Museum of Heritage in Canberra to create a really vibrant waterfront district, something that's pretty common across all of Thessia's shorelines. Now, most of our cities have always maintained some kind of hilltop park overlooking the main business district, but the recreation of King's Park into Thessia's Queen's Park here turned out really nicely and boasts one of the best views from anywhere we've ever built. Our park space is also significantly improved with the addition of the Potatoly Botanical Garden, a collection of props, trees and assets that make up a real authentic park space using sub-buildings and lots of props for detailing. The space includes plants from ILUS and the amphitheatre overlooking the entire CBD district with a specialist Japanese garden. One of the best park builds, if not the best park build we've ever done in City Skylines. One of my favourite things about Thessia is that the vast majority of its infrastructure, in particular the buildings, are all DLC and base game assets. There's very few custom assets in this city, and this is really our testament to asset knowledge. We know exactly what buildings we want to sit where, with different complements of layers of height around them. Something I'm particularly proud of in CS1 is our ability to pick out and know exactly which asset we need. But on the flip side of that, I feel it's currently one of my weakest aspects of CS2, just due to significantly thousands less hours spent in that game compared to CS1. But Ascension Town Centre is a wonderful collection and showcase of what some light modding can do to those base game assets that we use every day. And whereas the topography in Orchid Bay helped us dictate when the build ends, in Thessia it kind of became the build. Here we use the theme mixer mod to change the colour of polluted water to a lava colour to help create an actual lava flow, while building volcano viewpoints up the active side of the mountain. Easily one of the quirkiest and weirdest builds we've ever done. And while not nearly as large or as dominant as the Ilo's Sky Harbour, our second modded airport in the form of Thessia's international complex is really cute. Lots of public transport convergence and some fantastic custom planes from the wonderful Blue Thunder, who has provided us with many custom assets down the years. But honestly, seeing Thessia back today in a more retrospective format like this really reminds me of just how much we've done in this city. Of course, it is now more than 18 months old since we started this build, and I know it hasn't had an episode for quite a while just due to the waning interest, but I promise I will finish this project at some point. It would be such a shame to have one unfinished build when all the other ones before it were always seen through to completion, and that's even our mantra now in CS2 these days. And also, having just come off the back of recorded and edited those ILO sequences to see how far our modding capabilities have come from one city to the next really begs the question, what would our third modded CS1 city ever have been like if we'd ever built it? It's pretty unlikely that will ever happen now, just due to the waning interest in the first game now that CS2 is really starting to improve, especially in the second half of 2024 as more mods and assets begin to arrive for the sequel, and those base game updates from Colossal Order are now starting to make a difference, at least in the playstyle that we all like to play in. But that is a double-edged sword, isn't it? That improvement to CS2 has really hurt modded CS1. It's not something you see too often on YouTube these days. Maybe Thessia might not be the most popular series, but it is certainly one of my favourite builds we've ever done on the channel. The collection of individual separate towns all connected with public transport lines in various different forms is certainly my favourite way of building. And I really wish Thessia would have had a little bit more interest in it. But I think the fact it was a train-only start with more of a county-style build in an Australian theme off the back of ILOs just really didn't have enough eyes on it from the start, unfortunately. But that doesn't detract from some of the beautiful work here, and I know Thessia holds a special place in many of your guys' hearts as well, even some more so than ILOs, which, having seen the two side by side today, I can certainly see why. There's lots of really original ideas here in the great translation of real-world infrastructure from Australia into city skylines is pretty evident across most parts of the city, and the collaboration of Teddy Radko building this massive bit of infrastructure will always mean Thessia holds a special place in my heart. Please do bask in some of my favourite views from around the yet-to-be-finished Thessian Isles. Which takes us to present day, nearly a year into the launch of Cities 2, I'm currently working on Edinburgh and Kokai, and the surprise pregnancy with Rannoch in Cities 1 Vanilla. All 3 projects are at differing stages, and already becoming the favourite builds of new people as we celebrate hitting 100,000 subscribers. I hope you've enjoyed this video, our retrospective part 2 of how Cities Skylines have become this entity that so many of us found joy from, and one that changed my life significantly. Whether you were an asset maker, a patron, a subscriber, a mod, or just a regular viewer, thank you so much for allowing me to hit this point. Maybe we'll hit 200k subscribers one day, and who knows what creations we'll be celebrating then. Happy 100k, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.